You're listening to RealAgriculture.com. Get real, get connected.
I'm Lindsay Smith with RealAgriculture.com. I'm joined today by Elaine Froese. She's the farm family coach out of Manitoba. Are you in Manitoba today? You travel a lot too.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
This
good.
week I'm home.
No, good for you. Okay. I am too. So that's always nice. Elaine, we're talking today about women's role on the farm, running the farm business, and maybe challenging some of the gender roles or the importance of certain aspects of farming. And I wanted to capture some of this conversation. Of course, there was a bit of a back and forth on Twitter talking about why women make great farm managers. But then, of course, there's all sorts of these other roles on the farm that are traditionally women's roles, but maybe they're not so well suited for it. So let's start with, why do women make great business managers?
Well, I think, first of all, in terms of being gender specific, I'd like to say that the farm management job the different roles and responsibilities should be allocated to the person who has the best skill set and desire to perform that job, regardless of their gender. But what I am seeing, Lindsay, is a lot of the women that I coach that are my age, I'm 58, and I never have been involved in the bookkeeping or accounting because that's not my skill set. I'm not a detail-oriented person. But the skill set that I think what women bring to farm management is their ability to keep more things on the go than one thing, in terms of not just being concrete and linear with the data and the accounting and the book, but also engaging a culture. And I think my comment on the Twitter feed was women are good at the communication culture, which is, to me, the foundation to all the other management functions that you're trying to perform on a farm. So they tend to have and relate well to the needs of employees because they're typically women are wired to look after other people's needs. That's part of the nurturing kind of thing that they do. Not that men can't, but women are also able to take care of some of those things or see a problem, a solution to an employee HR problem sooner than maybe others can. So the fact that they have a more holistic approach, I think, to management rather than just, are we profitable or what's our cost of production or, where are we going to plant canola this year? So I'm just thinking of a couple of women in my mind's eye who have been farm partners with their husbands for over 40 years, have been there side by side, have always stood in the gap for the things that needed to be done on an as-needed or emergency basis, typically would do all the payroll, typically would get the foreign workers reports done. Another woman, was very good with cattle as well, just because tends to be her gifting to be a good herds person. And so it really depends. When Merle Good made the comment that women are better at farm management or get it, is I think that's part of the wiring, that they understand that it's more than just financials. It's also the soft side or the emotional factors affecting planning that sometimes some men don't want to go there. And I'm just finding this awful trend in agriculture that you and I could spend days talking about, and it's conflict avoidance and procrastination. I just got off the phone with a woman 5 minutes before this call who's in distress. She's called me several years ago because her son has a huge desire to farm, but nobody else is paying attention to that. And I said, well, what has your accountant said? Well, nothing so far. I said, well, he can't read your mind. So if this is a dream and a vision that you have, why aren't you sharing it with your business partners who happen to be brothers-in-law? And why aren't you sharing it with your trusted advisors? Because I can't read your mind, and neither can they.
And it's so. Let's back up a little bit, because from the outset, we're talking about finding the roles for different people based on sort of their talents and perhaps their interests, their skill sets.
Yeah.
That they can develop. How would a farm even figure those out? Sometimes I think it's intuitive, or maybe people are very good at speaking up for themselves and saying, I love to do this, let me do it, and away it goes. But are there tools out there to help
Oh, yes. So one of the tools that I use to figure out the skills and talents would be a personal style assessment to see who on your farm team is wired towards task orientation, which is usually the guys. But my son is very low towards task, but very high towards people. So his sales and marketing bent is a good asset to our team, where my husband is very much get the job done and being more task oriented. And then another piece is how effective expressive you are in terms of impacting your environment and wanting to make change. So one of the best tools, I think, for families to figure this out is to actually sit down with a roles and responsibility sheet. And I have a template from Dick Whitman, who's a very good consultant from Idaho, that I use to help people figure out what's working for you, what do you enjoy, what gives you energy, and what do you need more learning, and where are the gaps for you. But if people aren't even willing to sit down and talk about job descriptions and why they want to do what they want to do, and then have a performance appraisal to figure out if they're doing a good job or not, then these things just kind of slide by until something happens where there's an explosion of conflict. And it can all be mitigated really well by having business partner meetings to assess and use the tools to help you figure out what your skills are, what job descriptions give you energy, and then what learning plan you need to fulfill those jobs well, and then whether or not there's going to be an evaluation on your performance. Because typically husbands and wives don't evaluate themselves or the jobs they're doing until the wife, typically when she's in her late or mid-60s, is saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to spend more time with my grandkids and travel. And so then there's a training function that has to happen that she, gives over the books or accounting or whatever role she was playing. Mm-hmm. And I think Merle's comment about women in management on farms is that typically we, as consultants and coaches, we see women as the drivers for the succession or transition process, because they're not only involved on the business system side, Lindsay, they're also very much the chief emotional officers, as John Fass has called them, on the family system side. So they want a happy family, and they can't stand the uncertainty anymore of being in what William Bridges calls the neutral zone. So they're not willing to put up with not knowing. And so they want to get plans in place. They want to get advisors on board, and they want to get agreements signed. And that's why I think Merle made that comment.
Mm-hmm. No, but what advice do you have, though, for a farm family that, let's say they do take the plunge and they're willing to start working on some of this, and they sit down and they do some of these assessments, and it becomes, let's say, glaringly obvious that certain people are in the wrong roles, and maybe there's a female that's, or like, how do you get past some of the traditional gender roles and some of the bias that might be there? Are farm families, how do you get past that?
Well, I think I just wrote an article about the culture. Are men and women in your farm team equal? Are they equally respected? Do they all have an equal voice at the table? Because if they don't, you're not going to win the battle. And because it's about respect for the skill set and respect for the opinion. I have a farm where I have one brother farming with his 4 sisters, and it's a beautiful thing because the parents have modeled respect between each other, and they expect respect. But again, when I was coaching that family, what was also clear is that they didn't have really clear roles, and they didn't have a chance to voice why they liked the jobs they liked and which jobs they had to do even if they didn't like them. So I think a lot of that tension and that conflict is around what your value system is around the respect that you have for everybody who's on your farm team. But the other piece you said was, what do you do when someone is in a role that they're not performing well? And that's where Dr. Fass will say, hire slowly and fire quickly. And in family businesses, that, of course, is the big bull in the middle of the room, is that nobody wants to fire someone who's not performing well. But you don't have to fire them. First of all, you have to talk to them and have a courageous conversation and say, this is not a personal attack. This is about your behavior and the expectations that were set for this position, and you're not meeting them. And A, B, and C is why you're not, and what do you plan to do differently to make this different? Mm-hmm. And and again, I think less than 8% of farms in Canada, Lindsay, have an HR plan. And if you open your eyes and start grabbing the resources that are now available to you, there's tons of agencies that are producing manuals and tools to help farms become more professional. And you can also hire an HR person to come in, like Dr. Bob Kent in Winnipeg has got beautiful resources around people managing people. And they're not expensive, and they're common sense based. And Bob is a systems kind of guy, and he works with farm families. He's a member of CAFA. And he would be someone, I think, that would be a great advisor to someone who's having problems with the whole firing or performance appraisal kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. All right. And as you mentioned, there are resources available. And Elaine, of course, you've also launched a book recently called Farming's In-Law Factor, dealing with sort of the family side of farming. So we will link to your page with this interview as well. So anyone who's interested can go check that out as well. Fascinating as always, Elaine. And you're right. We probably could talk about this for hours and I know that you do, so I appreciate your time, and hopefully this maybe spurs some action for some farm families that might be struggling with this, or who very much see a need to do this.
Yeah, that's the key word, is action, Lindsay. The Chinese have a proverb that says talk does not cook rice, and so we just need to stop chewing through these things and losing sleep over them and come up with a way to have those courageous conversations. And the other thing, farmers need to be willing to ask for help, because some of these things they can no longer do on their own with the complexity of the financial management that they're trying to accomplish. And so I would just encourage everyone listening to put the top 3 things down on a piece of paper that they'd like to see changed, and then find an outside facilitator or advisor that's willing to facilitate that conversation with the group, and then pay attention to the action plan that follows in terms of, who's the detailed-oriented person that should be doing the books, who's the one who loves to be out marketing, and what's your learning and training plan for the whole farm team.